Thanks for joining the Closer to the Dirt podcast. I'm your host and author, BJ Emerson, and I'm talking with readers today about the Edenbury Chronicles, a little bit of already. I'm here with two very good friends, Rich Fontanes, who's a campus minister, and at East Carolina University here through Every Nation campus, right? And a reader, more importantly.
Yes, of course.
No. A reader of this book, the Edenbury Chronicles. Now, you are not finished yet.
I'm not. I'm just finished chapter 16 this morning, and I think I'm a little more than halfway through.
Cool.
Yeah.
And also with me have another author, good friend of mine, helped him publish his book, and Don Mail. Don, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's something I'm looking forward to.
Great. And you also a reader.
Yes.
You read along as it was written a little bit, but then you kind of reread it after it was all done.
Yeah, once I got the full book, I started and read it straight through, and then I got the continuity of it. That's just me. I have trouble with. I've trouble watching TV that have different series. But let me watch the whole darn thing. Yeah.
All right. And Rich, how has your experience been reading this so far?
It's been good. I've been enjoying it. As mentioned, I'm reading it right now, and I've only been reading it through the book. I didn't follow along on the Substack, but kind of reminded me of like this the setting maybe, or just maybe the tone of the town. Kind of reminded me of a TV show, and I don't know how you feel about this, but
put it out there.
Gilmore Girls. Have you ever watched that show?
Maybe a couple episodes.
Okay, well. You should check it out.
Well, and I suspect the Gilmore Girls was maybe based on something else.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Everything's
right.
Everything's a derivative of something.
No, I received that, and all of this comes out of somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So, on that, who so far, Rich, is your favorite character?
I'd say Father Vance Shredder, and I think part of that is the fact that he's a priest, or he's like a minister, and I'm that, as you mentioned, I do campus ministry, and I wasn't always a Christian. Sounds like he wasn't always on board either. He sounds like he had long hair at one point. I have long hair right now.
Maybe he still does.
Oh, maybe he still does. Has that been mentioned? That could have been a detail.
It wasn't mentioned.
Yeah.
But what does Father Vance look like?
Good question. I imagine him. I don't even know why I imagine this, but I kind of almost see him looking like, it's like his hair's not as long, maybe short, but you can see like a little, like, there's a little shagginess to it still. So.
There's a little rebellion there?
Yeah, I think so. I think he likes the fact that he doesn't look like the typical priest.
Well, he has tattoos.
He does. And
I'm going to give you a spoiler.
Okay.
He's got a tattoo that says Stephanie.
Ah, okay, that it makes sense. Based on what I've been,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, stay tuned on that one.
Will do.
I'm confused about Father Vance. You went through and did a good description of him, but he wore a collar, a priestly collar. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of in doubt whether he was Episcopalian, Catholic, and then he kept this persona like Rich described, but he was very careful. He only took off the collar once, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And everybody thought, whoa, what has happened to Father Vance? Has he fallen off the wagon? No,
so, he just went to another town.
Yeah,
he was just visiting.
But why did he take his collar off? That had me.
Don, I want to ask you, who is your favorite character?
I think I'm going to have to settle on Zeke, because that's the role I'd want to play.
Interesting.
Yeah, I want to be the Wizard of Oz. I want to be the one that moves and pulls all the chains and orchestrates stuff and analyzes stuff. That's what I'd like to do. So therefore, I'd like to be Zeke. I don't know how Lucy is, and I don't know how Sandy would appreciate my being Zeke with Lucy in the picture.
What's the first bizarre act of nature that happens in the book?
The tree?
The tree.
Yeah.
Zeke's first day He goes to the Warren farm, and a tree has grown up in the middle of this mudroom overnight, silently. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's just almost like something growing where it shouldn't, or maybe a fertility where you would expect infertility.
Wow.
Could
That's
have been like
profound.
the tree in the Garden of Eden, the one you don't, but it wasn't a fruit-bearing tree. So that had me baffled.
Well, let's talk about Edenbury in general, and maybe some parallels. And I didn't see this until much later as I was writing this. All right, in the Garden of Eden, in the middle of Eden was a garden in Genesis. Okay, in the middle of Eden was a garden. In the middle of the garden was what?
The tree.
A tree.
The tree of life, excuse me.
Okay. In the middle of Edenbury, there is a what? In the town, in the middle of Edenbury, there's a
Town Square or
the town square, the park.
park?
Yeah,
In the middle of the park now is what? What's in the middle of the park now?
right now, rocks.
Rocks.
Yeah.
These boulders.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Huh.
all
That's
right?
intriguing, yeah.
I thought of that and I was like, well, that's interesting. Certainly not intentional, but something that came out of it. Again, but there's a lot of stuff that wasn't intentional. What's your favorite bizarre act of nature thus far?
That's a tough one because I've liked multiple ones, but I think it may be the mist.
Mm-hmm.
I think just the idea, number one, the visual of people like losing their dogs, right? Like pets, people looking for their pets, and you're like, yeah, how would they find them, you know? And then just what was left behind. It seems like, okay, once again, I guess going back to like almost fertility or like growth, right? Like well, what's left behind is all this growth, and Stephanie even lays out in there, which I thought was a really cool moment.
Well, Stephanie found a patch of flowers alongside
Yes.
the road,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she keeps, later you'll see she comes back to it. She brings other people back to it. And she gets closer to the dirt.
Yeah.
And that's her thing. She kind of discovered that. So she's laying out in it. And I almost think she's like waving her arms around like it's like making a snow angel, right, in this. And she's actually floating on top of these little flowers that are holding her up with all these hundreds of little arms and their petals. And she can hear stuff. And so that's her thing. That's her connection, I think. So, Don, what was your favorite bizarre act of nature?
I think I had two, both involving Lucy. One where she came off the balcony and just sort of floated down.
Yep.
And the other one was the little whirligig or
The tornado?
tornado or dust devil following her down but when she turned, it quit. It didn't follow her after she made a turn. That was,
You caught that, huh?
yeah.
All right. Good. Yeah, that was like chapter 1, and Zeke sees her, and he sees that. And he's like, something special.
Yeah.
About her and this place, good stuff. How else is Lucy special? What's the deal with her locket?
Does he know about the locket?
I do know about the locket.
Okay, and,
Yeah.
how it was made?
Yeah, it was made from the wood
Okay.
it was made from the trees that grew 50 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. Which
Yep.
seems to have some sort of significance because we see with Zeke's library, it seems to be special, and it was built from the same wood.
And the barn was made
Yes.
with the same wood. Right. So there's a theme there, something with the wood. But the rocks are also, the rocks are not wood. And so why are there rocks as opposed to wood? Why didn't some trees grow up in the middle of the town square instead of rocks?
I had an idea of what I thought of the rocks, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess what was significant about the rocks for me was the fact that they sang. And so when Rebecca puts her ear up against it, she hears it, and Lucy hears it too, which is, I think, maybe the first time we see that an adult is hearing what the children are hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I thought that scripture about the rocks will say, like, if we're not going to sing out, if we're not going to, sing out our praise in our worship of God, like He can make the rocks do it.
Right. And creation will cry out.
Yes. Yeah. So,
Right. Good. All right. Well, what does it mean to be closer to the dirt then?
It seems to be a pride thing, and I think that's mentioned. And that's what stuck out to me about Stephanie when she laid down. Initially, I was like, "Oh, she's a police officer. She's a sheriff, right? She's a law enforcement officer, and if she's a sheriff in this town, she's a pretty big deal, right?"
Yeah.
So for her to pull over and just lay on the ground, that's the first thing that stuck out to me. Was like, that's weird. That's like
Humility?
yeah, like you're not going to see a police officer do that under normal circumstances. And so that like that humility did stick out to me. And then she did hear something from the flowers. So I was like, oh, she had a moment of humility. She kind of put her pride aside and said, hey, I'm just going to experience this. I'm going to experience whatever amazing, whatever wonderful things happening here.
Yeah.
And she was almost rewarded for it in a way. And so that was so I think it's the humility, the kind of setting aside your pride, or maybe for the kids, not necessarily having as much pride as the adults do.
Yeah. And one of the lines was, so as you get older, you kind of lose the signal,
Yes.
maybe. But that's really more about, pride. But good point about Stephanie. I hadn't really thought of it like that with her. But,
I looked at it entirely different.
yeah.
I struggled with that, as I think I told you, the closer to the earth thing, what they're actually trying to get to. And I don't know where it hit me, but I looked at it as you have to be born again. You have to be as a child to gain entrance. So a child is closer to the earth. So I figured that I would get close to the earth, I would become like a child, and then gain my entrance into.
So is it really about childlike faith?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it's, and that's one of the themes. And I think Father Vance's second sermon, if you haven't got to that yet, his second sermon is basically be like little children, and that's how we should approach things.
Yeah. But it was a good mirror to look into for what you want to be in when Eden becomes another reality.
Yeah.
Okay, is Edenbury? Was that your thinking that you just took Eden and add Bury to it, and then why
Is it
in the
really
world
that
did you
simple?
pick Kansas? Huh? What? Pardon me?
Could it really be that simple?
Yeah, that's right. I would, as an author type person, I was looking at it through two lenses, from the reader's perspective, and then from the author's perspective. Why is he writing it this way? Mm-hmm. What is the expected impact as he go through the book? Will this show up again? And it slowed my reading process down, because I'd come to a crossroads and spend time thinking, okay, what did he have in his mind here? What's it? Is this anticipatory for something?
You're assuming I had something in mind.
Yes.
So let's and many times I did not. I think in general I had a scope of, I wanted to be theologically faithful with it, although it is fiction, so I was able to make up a bunch of stuff, right? And fun characters and all of that, and the bizarre acts of nature. But so as I was writing it each week, there would be problems that I would create for myself. A prop or some kind of object or a person or relationship, something that I threw in there that I knew I would have to solve as a problem later. And as the story unfolded, it was really like a giant puzzle, jigsaw puzzle. And so, but there was a bunch of missing pieces, whole sections that I need to fill in. And it was really tremendous how it happened. As I would write, I was like, oh my gosh, I left this problem I had over here. This solves that problem in a really profound way. And I brought that piece back in and I put it in the puzzle, and how the puzzle turned out, I was like, oh my gosh, this thing just filled in miraculously with these pieces of different things that I pulled back. In chapter 1, there's a bat that is mentioned in Angus's office. It comes back in 15 or something like that. Zeke asked Lucy, where'd that bat come from? Stay tuned on the bat. All right.
He hadn't gotten to that yet.
He hasn't got to
I'll
the bat
stop
yet.
Then.
Right. So, but that's an example of I put that in there, and then later I was able to solve a massive problem with this one thing that I mentioned in previous chapters that I really didn't even, intend to. So the two options are right by the seat of your pants, we call that a pantser, or outline the whole thing and plan it all out ahead of time. I am not that person, right? I am adaptability is kind of the strength, and I brought that into the book in writing the book, and so and that I think that's what I'll continue to do. My problem is that if I do anything I do going forward, and we could talk about what's next for the book, but now I don't have a blank canvas. I have a lot of stuff I have to incorporate. So I do have some parameters. I do have a framework and some things I have to, if I go back in time to 50 years prior with the Warren Farm, with the grove of trees, with that problem they had, that generation faced, or I go into the future, I still have all these parameters I have to work around. So how will that work for me? That's an interesting question. We'll see. So let's talk about some of the, I think one of the main themes is this difference in thinking that you're going to see between these folks in Edenbury, or some of the folks in Edenbury, and this other place that they're going to go to called Dunhaven. And I think their approach in Edenbury is like they are curious about what's happening with these bizarre acts of nature. They don't just write them off as, oh, this is like demonic. And, some people want to destroy the rocks, right? But some people want to save the rocks. They want to hey, what do they have to say? And they're like this great recreational playground. They're like, hey, this is a lot of fun. These kids are having a great time, right? They show up on the first day of this fall break that these kids are on, a week out of school, and the rocks show up as this great playground feature, right? Yeah. So that's fun, but some people don't like the rocks. Have you gotten to that point where they're like, no, we need to destroy the rocks?
Yeah, they have like the council meeting where it's like there's people. I love how the room is divided. There's a section for and against.
Yep.
So yeah, you see that.
So they are divided, and why? Some people want to get rid of the rocks. They're dangerous, right? We don't know if they're going to disappear, which like the barn did, and then it came back. And then Father Vance says, he says, creation. I don't believe nature wants to take from us. I believe it wants to give. And that was a demonstration with all the fruits and vegetables, these miraculous, giant-sized different things that everybody came into the room with, and then they all had a big produce exchange, right? And that was kind of fun. Well, in this other town, I think where we're going to see this contrast is we don't want to be curious about this because God is done with the earth, and we're just ready to go. And because all this is going to be destroyed, Father Vance's opinion is, hey, we can participate in heaven coming to earth. Why is that controversial? What's the problem with that?
It's interesting. I'd like to take it a step back. They had one of the children come up and read the scripture reading, which was the Lord's Prayer. The kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that to me was somebody telling it, we're in heaven right now. God's just got to come back and refurbish it. I figure God is a cheapskate in a sense. He's very frugal. And he's not going to waste all the effort and energy and finances he put into building this globe and just throw it away and start something new. That's wasteful. So he's going to redo the earth, and we can be a part of that. We can lay some of the groundwork, but more importantly, it's the mindset that we have.
Yeah. Because
we want to bring kingdom on earth as it is in heaven.
Right.
That's our responsibility. That's one of the things that we were praying for. So therefore, that's one of the things we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And in so doing, we move the process along.
For 2,000 years, believers have been praying as Jesus taught us, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we can participate in that. And that's what we've been asking for. That's Jesus taught us how to pray. And so if we can be a part of heaven coming to earth, even before Jesus returns, in taking part in restoring this new creation. And some would argue that started with Jesus' resurrection, right? And so that's really the mindset. And so that's really, for me, was helpful. And again, transformational as I was writing it, that theme came out. And I see creation differently. I see the earth differently. I see people differently. And if we're going to focus on Genesis chapter 3 and the fall as believers, what if we backed up and looked at Genesis chapter 1 and what that garden was like? God walked with Adam and Eve, and he's like, hey, go subdue this place and expand my presence and my, this creation. That's your job. And have we forgot about that is the question. You think we forgot about that?
I know in my case, I'm in my 10th decade, is it?
You're 91, right?
Yeah, almost. My whole perspective before reading this book had started to change. I saw things in a different light. There was beauty where I didn't see beauty before. There was excitement where I thought was maybe boring before. I envy it in a sense, and I hope you all get to go through it, because you see a child differently. It's tears to my eyes. It's a really dynamite feeling.
And so if we see people made in the image of God, how does that change things for us? Instead of starting at Genesis 3 as like, hey, everybody's a sinner, what if we backed up and started with Genesis 1 and said we're all made in the image of God? How does that change the conversations for you when you're on campus talking to people and you see them that way? And you see them acting like, and they're reflecting God's image, you could point that out to them. Do they even know that they're doing that? So how does that work for you? How do you see people? Are you a Genesis 3 believer or are you a Genesis 1 believer?
I would like to be a Genesis 1 believer, but maybe my actions, maybe by my speech, I tend to go on the Genesis 3 side, right? I view it from more of the negative perspective of like, oh, hey, we're sinners, and that's important to know, right? Because
for sure.
Why?
Yeah.
It's
a problem.
It's pretty important. It's important to the core of the Christian belief, right? But I do the Genesis 1, and I like how you put it that way. But the Genesis 1 view is like, we can have positive reinforcement or we have negative reinforcement. And shame or shaming someone can only go so far.
Yeah.
I say only go so far. It doesn't go very far at all.
Right.
There may be an emotional response initially.
Right.
But we know those don't last a week, 2 weeks, it's back to whatever,
Or it's fear-based.
Yeah, fear-based. Yeah, exactly. And that's not what the gospel is or should be.
Right.
And so I think the looking at Genesis 1 perspective of like, hey, you're made in the image of God. Now I or any of us, we can walk up to anyone. It doesn't matter what we perceive. They may look a certain way, and we say, oh, they're not going to receive this, or maybe you're just not even in just sharing the gospel, but just being kind, right, or nice. Yeah. It's like I'll say, oh, they're not going to receive this. It's like, well, if I take it back, and it's like, oh, they're made in the image of God, that changes things.
It changes the basis of the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's huge. And I think, it can lead to, what can I see? What is God like about this person?
Or how are they reflecting his image?
Yes.
And can you point that out to them and draw that out? And it's okay if they say, if I were to say, Rich, what you just did there, you're really reflecting God's image. I see something in you that your Creator put in you, and you're reflecting his image. Did you see that? And it's okay for them to say no.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't see that. I don't believe that. But you just, drew a bigger circle for them and put them in it as someone who, was made in God's image. And they feel that.
Yeah.
They know that. And that's going to come back to them, and they will remember what you said.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think if you can encourage someone. I've seen this. I saw this over the weekend. I saw someone who clearly a deficit of encouragement in their life. You know, emotionally, probably abused by parents, bullied their whole life, and I was able to bring attention to them that, hey, you're made in the image of God. If He's created you, He hasn't made a mistake.
Yeah.
So you're not a mistake. And I can encourage him in that moment. And I've seen, beginning of the weekend, a guy who, you know, head was so low that it was almost parallel to the ground, to a guy who I saw him on campus on Tuesday, and I want to say his head was held high, but it was higher.
Yeah.
You know, and there was a smile on his face, which I had never seen before. So I think that can impact someone.
That's good. The other end of the story, though, the other thing that we can do with that, if we look at, you know, we talk about opening up the beginning from Genesis 3 to Genesis 1. The other end, though, is that in creation, in the new creation, we're going to have roles there. And if you were to ask somebody, hey, what's your role going to be in this new creation? What do you, and you know, what are they going to say? Like, oh, you know, what could they say to that?
Probably that'd be a very surprising question, I think, for most people.
Yeah.
I think for most people, they'd be like, oh, I thought we were just going to sit around in a worship service, or it's just going to be, I remember seeing this movie when I was a kid. It was like heaven, but it's just like clouds around them, and everyone has wings. And I remember being a little kid and being like, that looks boring. Like, I don't know, you know, like not thinking it was an interpretation. I was just like, oh, this sounds boring. But
it does concern me that a lot of people seem to not know what they're going to be doing for all eternity.
Yeah.
Believers or otherwise, and especially for believers, and we have, well, can we back up to Genesis 1, and like the original plan was for us to be a part of expanding God's creation and subduing it and the earth, and now He's going to restore that, and we'll have a role on that new earth. We're going to have a role. And so I think inviting people into that, and like, oh yeah, we're not just going to be sitting around, you know, on the clouds and whatever. We're going to be managing kingdom resources, and God's going to be using us to do that, and we're going to get to do it together. So,
and I'll get to be able to go over and talk to Paul and ask him why, and talk to Isaiah and ask him.
And he's going to say, oh, here goes Don again.
So I picture being able to do that. I'm going to corner each one of those guys to find out a little bit more on why they did or didn't do something.
I think there's going to be a long line.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, maybe I can cut in.
Well, I really appreciate you guys coming and on the Closer to the Dirt podcast and talking about what it means to be closer to the dirt. And thank you for reading this book and being a part of this journey. And really appreciate you guys coming and sharing with everyone.